Hey there! Are you a crime scene investigator, law enforcement officer, or forensic scientist looking for a Facebook community that understands you? Check out Taction USA's forensic product groups. You'll find blogs, articles, information, and community. For those of us in the investigative field, there are not many lines of support out there, but Taction USA is a company that was founded by law enforcement for law enforcement. Subscribe today to get access to exclusive content. Just look for Taction USA in Facebook groups. Welcome to Crossing the Tape, your favorite true crime podcast. As always, I'm Hillary, and I'm joined by
Brendan.
And today we will bring you part 2 of the murders at Taliesin. Now, to backtrack a little bit, Frank Lloyd Wright, the famous architect, took up a mistress and decided to build her a huge home on his family's estate called Taliesin.
Yes.
The home is called that, not the estate.
No, the estate was nameless, like a bastard child.
Fitting. Anyhow, when we left off last time, there had been a terrible fire that had gone through the home, and 7 people were dead. However, their deaths were not caused by the fire, and that is what we will get into today.
Yes. So, before we burn it down, in addition to Frank Lloyd Wright and Mama, or Martha, Borthwick, a few of Wright's draftsmen also lived at the estate, along with Borthwick's children who occasionally visited. Among the employees were Emil Brodell, Thomas Brunker, David Lindblom, Herbert Fritz, and William Weston. For the summer months, Wright also employed 2 servants, who came to him at the recommendation of a friend of his who catered the opening of Wright's Midway Gardens in Chicago, which from what I saw is like an outdoor party, dining, concert venue.
Yeah.
The servants were husband and wife Julian and Gertrude Carlton. Julian was responsible for repairs and day-to-day maintenance of Taliesin, while Gertrude was the in-house cook. On August 15th of 1914, Wright was in Chicago completing the Midway Gardens, and Mama?
I'm not sure.
Martha.
Yeah.
And her
I'm
children.
sure about that one.
Yeah. And her children. The 5 draftsmen, as well as William Weston's 13-year-old son, Ernest, were all sitting down to enjoy a lunch made by Gertrude. Borthwick, her 8-year-old daughter, Martha, Jr., and 12-year-old John decided to take their lunch on the patio due to the summer heat making the house a bit unpleasant. Which, for such a giant house, still no air conditioning.
Right.
The 5 draftsmen and Ernest sat in the dining room of their living quarters. Julian Carlton served the meal and asked permission of William Weston to obtain a container of gasoline from the shed where the draftsmen kept their tools. Carlton explained that he needed the gas just to clean a few rugs. Standard practice.
Which,
I guess it'll dissolve
I suppose,
filth.
but then it would stink.
Yeah.
So I don't really understand that.
Wash them and let them air dry for like a week.
I don't understand that explanation.
But I guess the draftsmen weren't familiar with rug cleanings.
Probably not.
So they said, "Sure, man, you're the maintenance guy." Weston granted Carlton access to the tools and proceeded to eat his lunch with the others. Carlton, however, was privy to some information that the others didn't think he would know. You see, in the days leading up to August 15th, Julian Carlton began exhibiting strange behavior. He'd become argumentative with Borthwick and the other employees, and even engaged Emil Brodell in a physical fight after the two had a heated exchange. Julian refused to carry out a task as instructed by Emil, who angrily called Carlton, who was of Caribbean descent, a, quote, black son of a bitch. The fight was brief, but it didn't help Carlton's mental state. He had already been displaying paranoid behavior, staring out the window late at night, armed with a knife, as if he was afraid someone was going to harm Gertrude or himself in their sleep. So he's acting a bit weird.
Yeah.
And now that he considered Brodel an enemy, Julian Carlton was able to put a face to his paranoid delusions.
Yikes.
Yes. Julian hatched a plan to get even with the people that he felt wronged him. And to hear what he did, please join us on the other side of this message from the National Investigative Training Academy.
If you are looking for a career change or to expand your knowledge in an already established one, look no further than the National Investigative Training Academy. The National Investigative Training Academy, or NITA, N-I-T-A, has well over 100 courses with 70 professional development ones alone. NITA is constantly adding to their course catalog, and courses are focused on private investigation and security fields. Whether you would like to become a private investigator or you need continuing education for your investigative or security career, the National Investigative Training Academy is for you. All courses offered are 100% online and do at your own pace. Once completed, you will receive a certificate in that course. Sign up today at investigativeacademy.com. Make sure when you sign up for your courses, you mention we sent you there. We encourage you to get the best investigative and security training possible today. When you sign up, mention our brand ambassador code, BA2367. That's BA2367, and you can find those courses at investigativeacademy.com. Look for links in our show notes as well.
Wright and Borthwick were, of course, not pleased with Julian's behavior or his performance as a servant, and they had begun advertising in the newspaper for a replacement. Somehow, Carlton discovered their job listing, and he knew that at any moment he and Gertrude could get the boot. Angry and paranoid, Julian insisted he would serve the lunch, and instructed Gertrude to go pack her things and get dressed. He told her they were going to catch a train to Chicago and find new employment there, robbing Borthwick of the opportunity to fire them. So to his wife, this sounds like we're sticking it to the boss. We're going to go our own way.
Yeah.
But that's not exactly what the plan was. See, this turned out to be a ruse to get Gertrude out of the house. And with everyone busy enjoying their lunch, Julian Carlton retrieved the gasoline, to clean the rugs, of course.
Right.
But he also picked up an axe, and a small vial of something we'll mention later. He approached the main house, intent on revenge, especially for Emile Brodel. He encountered Mama Borthwick and her children on the patio, and swiftly bludgeoned the matriarch mistress to death as her children watched.
Yikes.
Little Martha attempted to run away, but she was quickly caught and killed after John had been dispatched as well. So all three are dead. Due to the sheer size of the home, the men inside eating their lunch never heard the children screaming. Had no idea.
Yeah.
Carlton soaked the bodies and the patio in gasoline and turned his attention to the dining room after the Borthwicks were set on fire.
Ugh.
Julian Carlton had locked the interior door to the dining room prior to the attack, and soaked the exterior door in gasoline, and set it on fire. He assumed the 6 men inside would be dead shortly. Without another avenue of escape, however, Herbert Fritz managed to break a window and leap out through the flames, and he broke his arm as he fell, but still managed to roll down a hill before he was badly burned. So one guy got away, thinking quickly. But the rest of the men weren't so fortunate. Because Emile Brodel attempted to escape from the same window, but after noticing Fritz's escape, Carlton stood by waiting. He struck Brodel with the axe, instantly killing him as he tried to climb to safety. And even though that was the main person he wanted to get, in for a penny, in for a pound.
Right.
William Weston was the next to attempt an escape, but he was met with 2 blows, which somehow he survived.
Oof.
Weston and Fritz were able to escape, reaching a neighboring residence to summon the sheriff and more citizens to help extinguish the now raging fire at Taliesin. Thomas Brunker, David Lindblom, and Ernest Weston were all struck as they came through the window, with Lindblom initially surviving but later succumbing to his injury on August 18th. Carlton figured he would be caught soon, thanks to Weston and Fritz making their escape, and he decided that rather than live with his deeds, he would take his own life. Carlton headed into the basement of the house as the fire raged, and he hid inside the furnace, which was of course not in use due to the summer heat. Inside the furnace, Carlton drank a vial of hydrochloric acid, which he took from the tool shed. Herbert Fritz with his broken arm, William Weston with his pair of axe wounds, and the bloodied and burned Lindblom, who is clinging to life,
right,
along with a group of good Samaritans, returned to Taliesin, even though the general public
didn't like it.
Yeah, they had a lot of scorn for the place. They all headed up there and were able to extinguish the flames, which had partially consumed the main residence. So it wasn't a total loss.
Right.
The house, at least.
The house.
The sheriff arrived and conducted a search of the grounds, locating Julian Carlton in the basement, still alive, but with severe internal injuries from the acid. He was quickly arrested and charged the following day with the murder of Emile Brodel, whose murder was witnessed by Weston, who was actually alive to testify.
Mm-hmm.
So that one was the most clear cut.
Yeah.
Everything else would take a little bit of, testimony and inference from a jury, but we've got one guy who can say
he at least killed
murder.
This one.
Yeah. In total, 7 people were violently murdered by Julian Carlton, including 3 children. Gertrude Carlton was found still on the property, waiting for Julian to meet her before they set out for a new life in Chicago. And she was completely unaware of what he had done.
Oof.
So, the property was big enough. I guess she was just sitting down the way a little bit.
Yeah, didn't know.
Claimed she had no idea. She was eventually released from police custody and hopped on a train to Chicago anyway and was never really heard from again.
Don't blame her.
No. Yeah, she got out of there, probably had a new name and everything.
Yep.
Word traveled quickly to Wright in Chicago, and as well as to Edwin Cheney, Mama Borthwick's former husband, and the father of John and Martha. Both men rushed to Taliesin to pick up the scraps of their lives. Edwin Cheney not only lost his wife to an affair, but in a matter of years his children were dead as well. Frank Lloyd Wright abandoned his first marriage and put up with years of slander to be with the woman he truly loved, and now he was alone again. Once again, the media had a field day with the massacre, often implying that it was Wright and Borthwick's debaucherous affair, which brought down God's wrath in the form of Carlton's insanity.
Jeez.
Yeah, it's a bit gross.
Yeah.
And they didn't have very pleasant things to say about Carlton's race either, but that's the headlines of the times, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
In a matter of weeks, it was evident the murder trial would not be necessary due to the damage Carlton caused himself with the acid. His stomach and esophagus were burned to the point that he was unable to eat. Despite medical efforts, Carlton eventually starved to death, refusing to give a motive or any other explanation about what he did to the residents of Taliesin. He did plead not guilty, which is...
Was it by reason of insanity?
I think he just said, I didn't do it.
Jeez.
And then they said, well, why'd you do it? Didn't? I'm not sad for the guy by any stretch, but what an awful way to die.
Yeah.
Starving to death because you can't eat because your insides are just melted. Ugh.
I think he thought that was probably going to be a quick solution and a quick way out, and instead it just dragged it on.
Even if he died quickly, you want to spend the last 5 to 20 minutes of your life screaming in pain and coughing up blood?
But he deserved it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad he didn't choose an easier route for suicide. Borthwick's children were taken to Chicago to be buried, and Frank Lloyd Wright decided to bury Mama Borthwick at a church nearby. He did not hold a funeral, and he didn't place a headstone on her grave because he didn't want to be reminded of the tragedy. He cut flowers from Taliesin's gardens and filled her casket with them, and once she was lowered into the ground, Wright filled the hole himself, scooping the dirt in by hand.
Jeez.
Yeah. So after a period of terrible grief, Wright rebuilt Taliesin, redubbed Taliesin II. In 1925, an electrical fire resulted in the second form of the manor being partially destroyed as well. Which sounds like there's a curse.
Well, it kind of reminds me of they're talking about making the second Titanic.
Yeah. Don't
do it.
I'm gonna put that juju on somebody.
Yeah.
However, in 1928, after the property was foreclosed on due to mounting debts, a divorce from his third wife, after the first wife granted a divorce, well, second wife, but Borthwick would have been his second.
Yes.
And a slump in his career, Wright was able to repurchase the land and began construction on Taliesin 3, which still stands today in its final form of 37,000 square feet, 600 acres. Yeah. Since 1973, the house has been a National Historic Landmark that serves as an everlasting reminder of the love cottage that it once was.
I don't think we need to visit that landmark.
No. You can check that one off the list.
Yeah. I think that would be, I don't know, too much.
That's a lot of negativity.
Too many bad vibes.
That's a lot of bad.
Yeah. Huh. But when we came across this case, I thought it was interesting because, as I mentioned in the first episode, I like his architecture.
Yes.
And I always have. I mean, since I was a little kid. But I never would have guessed such a wild... there's such a
massacre.
Yeah, massacre.
At one of his homes.
Right. That's surprising to me. And that's kind of why I wanted to cover it, too. We like to cover cases that are the lesser known. Mm. And this is one that I had never heard of, even knowing about the architect.
Mm-hmm. And the whole affair did a lot to harm his reputation. Yeah. Which led to that slump in his career later on, after the second Taliesin burned down. Yeah. But apparently, I believe it's the Grand Imperial Hotel in Tokyo. Mm. He built that. There was a terrible earthquake, and the building was like pristine. Everything else suffered terrible damage, but his hotel was exquisite. So that kind of strapped the rocket to him again, that this is the guy if you need something built. Right. Well, he had such a unique way of designing and engineering buildings. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't just... That's why I like a lot of his architecture, because it's not only nice to look at, but it's very well done. His early 20th century, late 19th century stuff was referred to as his prairie school style. Mm-hmm. He had a style, like, of eras. Mm-hmm. But they say the changing point, shifting from that to more of his kind of... The modern... Yeah, his... the future modern... Like right, it's very simple. It's, it's like there's a lot of rock and stone and wood, and it's very naturally built. But the turning point between his old style and this stuff that he's more known for now was the death and the fire. Yeah. The loss of his mistress. That kind of changed everything for him. Apparently the grief was so bad he was temporarily blind and weight loss and couldn't sleep. It was horrible. And once he finally got past that, rebuilt, burned down, lost the land, bought it back, rebuilt. He was a whole new man. Yikes. And he would often, they believe he used it as a seasonal residence from then on, from like the 30s onward. Yeah. That is the weird story of Frank Lloyd Wright's mistress and several employees and children. And the House Taliesin. Yeah. Well, we thank you for joining us. Please sign the crime scene log on your way out. Stay safe. And soap.